All right, we're here at my tiny worm bin, and the last time we were in here, we fed about a dozen roses. And just looking at the plastic right now, it's looking a little damp, and I'm not seeing any worms on here, but I'll give a double check. This is actually the last time we're going to use this plastic because I found some bubble wrap. So I'm going to be using this, and we'll see how moist the bin is to see how long this will be on here. But when we were in here last, there was a pretty massive hump right here where we had put in those roses and also some baby's breath. So let's go ahead and jump in here and see how it did. And I already see a little hole in this newspaper right here. So certainly they are attacking the roses. And I believe we also put some pulverized oats on top. So that may be why we're seeing some of that newspaper being disintegrated. So let's go ahead and jump in. Right here, I see some baby's breath, and I don't see the little flowers on it. I see a little worm there, but they're leaving some of the stems. But let's get in here. It's been 9 days since we put those in here, and I'm seeing no baby's breaths, just the stems of them, and the worms all in and out of them. We fed right down the center, so I'm just gonna kind of dig from underneath. And we put a lot of shredded cardboard in here too, dry shredded cardboard. And there we go, lots of worms. So we're seeing that shredded cardboard, and let's see if we're seeing any of the roses. I think this might be one right here. Ugh, they're just kind of in between it right there. I think this is one. Yep, as I kind of pull it apart, I actually see a little bit I think those are mites right there. So they probably got inside the little rose blossom there. It's also a lot more damp since we've been using that plastic. So the mites definitely like it more damp, and they like slightly more acidic conditions than the worms. So we might be seeing some of that too with some of this food still being in here. And again, shredded cardboard, they're all throughout that, and a little bit of rose petal again right here. Now the worms will eat both the food and the bedding, so they're going to eat these flowers up, and they will also eat that cardboard. So I see where the roses are kind of matted down because they're one inside each other, and this actually feels a little dry. We're not seeing them eat, but right here where it's all kind of mushy, I'm definitely seeing lots of mites. I'm gonna just kind of hold this here, and let's see if we can see these mites move. I think we're seeing a couple of potworms here as well. So conditions are a little bit too moist in here, and possibly because 9 days later there's still flowers in here. Maybe this was just a little bit too much food for them. So we're getting a little bit of a mite bloom here, but wow, look at that. Here's again the stems of the baby's breath, but right all through here, all kinds of worms. They're definitely enjoying it. And this right here is a stem from the rose, and the rose is completely off of it. But I am seeing more mites than I've seen in the past. All right, we'll keep going through here. And the bin has a very earthy smell to it. It always kind of smells like a forest floor, but in particular now it's got more of an earthy smell. And I don't know if that's because we're using flowers, so kind of more plant instead of like veggie, that kind of thing, but just something I noticed. It doesn't smell like it's fermented or ammonia smells. It just kind of more earthy, more like, I don't know, just earthy, I guess is the best way to say it. I'm just going to kind of separate some of the flower petals here a little bit. They are mushy, and no doubt in a couple days they would get all the way through this, but for some reason I just feel like I need to kind of mix this up. And I've been feeding down the center, lately, and I think what I'm going to try and do is do more of a ping pong feeding, kind of what I've seen AV do in a couple of his bins. Just kind of make it a little different and help me differentiate where I put the food. And let me kind of dig around everywhere. Lots of great worms. I love it. Lots of big, fat, thick, great worms here. Check that out right there. Just lots of great worms all throughout. The castings are looking fantastic. We've got little shreds of cardboard in here. I mean, things are looking really good for this bin. And it is, I believe, 87 days old, 87 or 86 days old. and it is just doing great. It's a little bit over half its lifespan, and right here is a cocoon. I don't know if you can tell, right on the end of my thumb right there is a cocoon, and it looks fairly light, so I would say that got laid probably very recently. And I mean, just look at these worms. These are all red wigglers, so the smaller ones are juvenile, and ones like this are probably adult. I can't tell if I can see his clitellum. Maybe not. Maybe not, because I don't see the bulging clitellum, which is kind of the identification of an adult worm. So let's keep digging around. I gotta stop again. Just a great showing of worms right here. I love when I dig through and I just see a huge cluster of worms. There's 600 worms when we started, 612 to be exact. And I'm wondering if that's the carrying capacity for this bin. When we originally started this over a year ago, 2 iterations ago, or actually, yeah, 2 or 3 iterations ago, we started with about 50 to 100 worms, and then it increased to 492, I believe, over 5 months. And then 5 months later, when we restarted it, it got up to 612, which made me think that that is probably the max this bin can hold. So we'll see when we harvest this if we get somewhere around 600 again, and then we'll know this is the carrying capacity of this bin, basically the max amount of worms that will grow and populate within this size volume of a bin. So yeah, pretty cool. And since I talked about carrying capacity, I should probably tell you how big this bin is. This is a 3-gallon bin, and I only get it up to maybe halfway, so we're talking a gallon and a half. So when I talk about the carrying capacity being only 600 worms, that's because we're only dealing with about a gallon and a half of volume. So what I've done here is kind of moved all the bedding to one side, and this is going to be my feeding zone. So I'm going to start by putting in shredded cardboard bedding. So with this shredded cardboard, we should be able to get the bin just a little bit drier. And with bins this tiny, it's actually very hard to have like perfect conditions in your bin. It always seems like they're either too moist or too dry or too moist or too much food or too little food. So there's just not a lot of forgiveness in a bin this small. So you just got to monitor it. That's why I try and check on it about every week, just like I do my other bins, but actually feed it every week, but I check on it more often. So we've got our good set of bedding down there. And even though we have a lot of food here, let me just kind of see how much we have. I will probably add just a little bit of lettuce, which is just a super fast food for them. So they've got some of this to continue to munch on, and then also they'll have some new food. I'm going to put these little stems down here too from the baby's breath. And let's see if we got most of it. Okay, I mean, there was about a dozen rose heads in here, and they really ate them down. I mean, when I started, or when I ended the last video, when I fed them last, the hump was pretty dramatic, and I wasn't even able to cover all the rose petals with, you know, the bedding and the castings that I had in here. So I am pretty impressed with how well they did in the last 8 or 9 days. So I think there's a bunch of worms right there. I think we did a pretty good job here. Let's go ahead and add some of that lettuce. So this is just the, you know, end of a lettuce stalk. We'll put that right there, and then we'll put another one right there. It looks like a lot of food, but this is a whole lot of air, a whole lot of water. So they're gonna take care of that in no time. And because I can't resist, I'm gonna give them a little piece of carrot from my garden. So some of the amendments I usually put on are a little bit of pulverized oats, and I'm not going to give them a whole lot, just a little bit of a sprinkling there. I also typically add some coffee grounds, and again, I'm going to try to just give them a little bit. And then finally, we'll give them some pulverized eggshells for grit, for their digestion. They have gizzards, and also for my garden, which all these castings will eventually go in. Okay, so now let's bury it up. And I love this as I'm burying it, I can see all the worms that had been piled up. This is a little different for me since I've got the food on the one side, so we may end up having a kind of a hump over here. I'll try not to make it too pronounced, but we want to get all the stuff over there, and if I find some stuff, I'll just bury it down here. But this bin is doing really well. I'm really impressed with it. The moisture level, although just a little bit too moist, is still doing all right. In fact, I don't know. I don't know if I should use this. I think what I'll do is I'll wait. I'm gonna go with just newspaper on top, and then I will decide from there if I should use this, because I don't want to just kind of put it over the edge and then, man, I've just got a big mite bloom, or I start to get some kind of fermentation in here, which I don't think is going to happen, but I just kind of want to avoid that. I typically run my bins just a little bit drier than most, and that's because I've run into problems with too moist of bins and fermentation and ammonia smells, and it wasn't a good situation. All right, so I still want to put the pulverized oats on top. And again, these are just from my pantry. I had some expired oats, so I just put them in this Magic Bullet blender and I pulverize them. You want to make sure that you sprinkle it very lightly. If you get too many clumps, then they won't be able to get in. It kind of gets matted down. But let's go ahead and spread this newspaper on top. I don't know if this is going to be enough. In fact, after we're done videoing, I may put some newspaper that I'll cut up on here, because I don't know that this is going to cover it in the way I want it to, with, you know, just the amount of airflow that gets in here. You can see these holes right here are fairly big, and there's 3 here, I think, 1 here, and 3 there, and some on the lid. So this gets great airflow, but that also helps it to dry out. And we are in the summertime here in Florida, so it just kind of sucks the moisture right out of the bin. So we'll see how we do. I may come in here in a couple days and add that bubble wrap to the top. So if you see on the next video that I've added bubble wrap, that's why. I'll go ahead and check on it. And I encourage you to check on your bins. I wouldn't necessarily disturb them every day, but every couple days, give them a check and see how they're doing. So I think that'll do it. I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing well, and happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.